In our age of perpetual notification, where attention fragments like shards of a broken mirror, we find ourselves inhabiting a wasteland more barren than any I once imagined. The modern mind, besieged by digital stimuli, resembles Prufrock's paralyzed consciousness, but magnified 1,000-fold. Where once we feared the inability to dare disturb the universe, now we cannot even locate the universe beneath layers of virtual noise. Yet within this digital fragmentation lies an ancient possibility, the cultivation of contemplative awareness that transforms scattered moments into profound presence. The same poetic attention that once rescued meaning from the rubble of post-war civilization can now restore depth to our pixelated existence. Through disciplined contemplation, we discover that silence speaks more eloquently than any tweet. That depth emerges not from information accumulation but from patient attention to what already surrounds us. The contemplative mind offers not escape from modernity, but transformation of it. Let us explore how poetry's patient gaze can restore the sacred dimension of ordinary experience, even within our hyper-connected world. Chapter 1: The Tyranny of Perpetual Stimulation. We live now in what I might call the age of infinite scroll, a condition where consciousness becomes enslaved to external stimulation rather than governed by internal rhythm. The modern mind, constantly refreshing its feed of information, loses contact with the deeper currents of thought that require silence to emerge. This is not merely distraction, it is a fundamental alteration of human attention itself. Consider how the contemplative traditions always recognize that wisdom emerges from stillness, not from accumulation of data. The Desert Fathers withdrew not because they despised the world, but because they understood that authentic engagement with reality requires periods of deliberate disengagement from its surface turbulence. In our digital age, we have inverted this understanding, mistaking constant connectivity for profound engagement. The consequences extend beyond personal psychology into the very fabric of culture. When attention becomes fragmented, language loses its precision. When silence disappears, words lose their weight. We witness the degradation of public discourse, the collapse of nuanced thinking, the reduction of complex realities to binary oppositions. The digital medium, with its demand for immediate response, militates against the patient deliberation that authentic understanding requires. Poetry offers resistance to this tyranny precisely because it demands a different quality of attention. A poem cannot be consumed like a news headline or absorbed like a social media post. It requires what I have called negative capability, the ability to remain present with uncertainty, mystery, doubt, without irritably reaching after fact and reason. This capacity, essential for both artistic creation and spiritual development, withers under conditions of perpetual stimulation. The contemplative mind recognizes that true freedom emerges not from unlimited choice but from disciplined attention. In choosing where to place our awareness, we shape not only our individual consciousness but the cultural consciousness of our time. The question becomes, will we allow our attention to be colonized by algorithms designed to capture and monetize it, or will we reclaim the sovereign territory of contemplative awareness? This reclamation begins with the recognition that silence is not empty space waiting to be filled, but fertile ground from which authentic thought emerges. The contemplative mind learns to distinguish between the noise that distracts and the silence that reveals. Chapter 2: Rediscovering the Rhythm of Natural Attention. Human consciousness, when allowed to follow its natural rhythm, moves like music between sound and silence, expansion and contraction, engagement and withdrawal. This organic pattern, observable in all natural phenomena from the breathing cycle to the changing seasons, provides the template for authentic contemplative practice. Yet our digital environment imposes an artificial rhythm that violates these natural cycles. The natural mind alternates between focused attention and diffuse awareness, between active problem-solving and receptive contemplation. Neuroscience confirms what contemplatives have long known: creativity and insight emerge during periods of apparent mental rest, when the conscious mind steps back and allows deeper patterns to surface. The default mode network of the brain, active during rest, proves essential for integrating experience and generating new understanding. Digital technology, however, eliminates these essential fallow periods. The smartphone ensures that every moment of potential contemplation can be filled with stimulation. Waiting becomes scrolling, silence becomes podcast consumption, solitude becomes social media engagement. We lose contact with the rhythm that allows consciousness to renew itself. Poetry teaches us to recognize and honor these natural rhythms. The prosody of verse mirrors the breathing body, the heartbeat, the tidal flow of attention itself. When I crafted the opening lines of The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, the rhythm carried as much meaning as the words, the hesitant, self-interrupting cadence that embodies modern anxiety. Similarly, the four quartets move with the deliberate pace of contemplative insight, each movement requiring the reader to slow down, to breathe with the verse rather than consuming it. The contemplative mind learns to trust these natural rhythms rather than fighting them. This means creating space for what appears to be emptiness but is actually fullness, the pregnant pause that allows meaning to emerge, the silence that gives weight to words. In our addiction to constant stimulation, we have forgotten that the most profound experiences often occur in the spaces between activities, in the moments when we are simply present to what is. Rediscovering natural attention requires deliberate practice in an environment designed to prevent it. This might involve establishing digital Sabbaths, creating technology-free zones, or simply learning to tolerate the anxiety that arises when we stop feeding the addiction to stimulation. The goal is not to reject technology but to establish conscious relationship with it, using tools rather than being used by them. The reward for this practice is the gradual return of depth perception, the ability to see beyond surfaces, to recognize patterns that emerge only through sustained attention, to hear the subtle music that underlies the apparent chaos of contemporary experience. Chapter 3: The Sacred Art of Listening. In our cacophonous age, listening becomes a radical act of resistance against the assault of competing voices demanding our attention. True listening, not merely hearing, but the quality of receptive awareness that allows reality to reveal itself, requires a stillness that our culture actively discourages. Yet without this capacity, we remain trapped in the echo chamber of our own assumptions, unable to receive the gifts that silence offers. The contemplative traditions distinguish between ordinary hearing and sacred listening. Ordinary hearing processes information, categorizes sounds, responds with analysis or judgment. Sacred listening creates space for the unexpected, the paradoxical, the quietly revolutionary insights that emerge only when we stop imposing our agenda on experience. This deeper listening transforms both listener and what is heard. Poetry demands this quality of listening from both writer and reader. When composing, I learned to listen for the words that wanted to emerge rather than forcing predetermined meanings onto the page. The famous opening of The Waste Land, April is the cruelest month, came not from analytical reasoning but from listening to the seasonal rhythms that contradicted conventional sentiment. The line captures something true about the spiritual life, that hope can be more difficult to bear than despair. Digital communication, however, militates against this deeper listening. Social media platforms reward quick responses, immediate reactions, the rapid-fire exchange of opinions that masquerade as conversation. The algorithm favors engagement over understanding, controversy over contemplation. In this environment, nuance disappears, complexity gets reduced to slogans, and the patient attention required for genuine dialogue becomes economically unviable. The contemplative mind cultivates what we might call poetic listening, an attention that remains present to layers of meaning, to the music beneath the words, to what is not said as well as what is spoken. This requires slowing down, creating space between stimulus and response, learning to tolerate the discomfort of not immediately knowing what we think about something. Such listening transforms our relationship to solitude. Instead of experiencing silence as absence, something to be filled with distraction, we begin to recognize it as presence, as the fertile ground from which authentic thought emerges. The contemplative learns to distinguish between loneliness, which seeks escape from isolation, and solitude, which provides the necessary condition for deep listening. This practice extends beyond personal meditation into the realm of cultural engagement. When we listen contemplatively to the voices of our time, including dissenting voices, uncomfortable truths, perspectives that challenge our assumptions, we create possibility for genuine dialogue rather than mere debate. We begin to hear the deeper currents beneath surface disagreements, the shared human concerns that unite us beneath ideological divisions. The sacred art of listening also attunes us to what I have called the still point of the turning world, those moments of profound presence that emerge when we stop trying to grasp experience and allow it to unfold naturally. These moments cannot be manufactured through technique but arise spontaneously when we create the conditions of receptive awareness. Chapter 4: The Discipline of Presence. Presence, that quality of awareness that fully inhabits the current moment without grasping or rejecting, emerges not as a feeling but as a discipline. In our age of distraction, true presence becomes both more difficult and more necessary than ever before. The contemplative mind recognizes that presence is not a luxury for mystics but a practical necessity for anyone seeking to live authentically in our fragmented world. The digital environment conspires against presence by fragmenting our attention across multiple time frames simultaneously. We inhabit the present moment while simultaneously monitoring past events through social media memories and anticipating future possibilities through news feeds and notifications. This temporal scattering prevents the kind of deep inhabitation of the present that allows meaning to emerge from ordinary experience. Poetry offers training in presence through its demand for precise attention to immediate experience. When crafting The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock, I discovered that the poem's power emerged from the complete inhabitation of a specific consciousness at a particular moment, not abstract commentary about modern alienation, but the lived experience of uncertainty as it unfolds in real time. The reader enters Prufrock's mind not as observer but as participant in the struggle between desire and paralysis. This poetic presence differs from both nostalgia and fantasy. Nostalgia uses the present moment as an escape route to an idealized past. Fantasy projects consciousness into an imagined future. Presence, by contrast, finds in the current moment sufficient depth to sustain contemplative attention. This requires what Buddhist practice calls beginner's mind, the ability to encounter familiar experiences with fresh awareness. The discipline of presence reveals that every moment contains layers of meaning accessible only through sustained attention. The seemingly mundane experience of morning coffee becomes, under contemplative gaze, a meditation on transformation, impermanence, the gift of sensory awareness, our connection to global systems of trade and agriculture. Nothing is too ordinary to serve as gateway to the extraordinary. This practice challenges our addiction to stimulation by revealing that depth emerges not from novelty but from patient attention to what already surrounds us. The contemplative mind learns to find inexhaustible richness in simple experiences, watching light change throughout the day, attending to the rhythm of breathing, following the movement of thoughts and emotions without immediately judging or analyzing them. Digital technology can either support or undermine this practice, depending on how consciously we engage with it. Mindful use of technology means creating clear boundaries, establishing regular periods of disconnection, and using devices as tools for specific purposes rather than default activities to fill empty time. The goal is not technological asceticism but conscious relationship with our tools. The discipline of presence also transforms our relationship to difficulty. Instead of immediately seeking escape from uncomfortable emotions or challenging circumstances, contemplative awareness creates space to experience these conditions fully without being overwhelmed by them. This capacity for presence with difficulty proves essential for both personal growth and social engagement. We cannot address the crises of our time from a position of unconscious reactivity. Ultimately, the discipline of presence reveals that eternity is not located in some distant realm but is accessible within the depths of temporal experience. This insight, central to mystical traditions across cultures, becomes practically available through the cultivation of contemplative attention in ordinary life. Chapter 5: Integration through Contemplative Reading. In our age of information overload, contemplative reading emerges as both refuge and resistance, a practice that transforms textual consumption into spiritual discipline. Unlike the scanning and skimming that digital media encourages, contemplative reading requires what medieval monks called lectio divina, a quality of attention that allows texts to work upon consciousness rather than merely providing data for mental processing. The modern reader, trained by digital interfaces to process information rapidly, often approaches even poetry with consumer mentality, seeking immediate comprehension, quick emotional payoff, or useful information to apply elsewhere. This approach misses the transformative potential that emerges only through patient, repeated engagement with texts that resist easy comprehension. The greatest works reveal their depth slowly, requiring us to grow into their wisdom rather than simply extracting it. When I composed for Quartets, I understood that the work demanded a different quality of attention from readers, not the linear progression through plot or argument, but the circular return to central themes that gradually deepen through repetition and variation. Like musical composition, the work's meaning emerges through the relationship between movements, the development of motifs, the interplay of statement and variation that creates significance beyond any single passage. Contemplative reading transforms the relationship between reader and text from consumption to conversation. Instead of approaching a poem or essay as an object to be understood, we enter into dialogue with consciousness that has wrestled with questions that concern us. The text becomes a mirror that reflects our own spiritual struggles while simultaneously offering perspectives we could not have generated independently. This practice requires what I have called negative capability, the capacity to remain present with uncertainty, mystery, and doubt without immediately seeking resolution. The contemplative reader learns to tolerate the discomfort of not understanding, recognizing that some insights emerge only after long germination in the unconscious mind. Meaning arrives not through analytical effort but through patient receptivity to what the text offers. Digital reading environments often undermine this contemplative engagement through hyperlinks, notifications, and the temptation to multitask. The screen medium itself encourages rapid scanning rather than deep absorption. Contemplative reading therefore often requires returning to physical books, creating distraction-free environments, and establishing regular reading practices that honor the rhythm of contemplative attention. The integration that contemplative reading provides extends beyond intellectual understanding to include emotional and spiritual transformation. Great literature works upon consciousness at levels deeper than rational thought, shifting our fundamental orientation toward life through prolonged exposure to alternative ways of seeing and being. This transformation occurs gradually, often without conscious awareness, as we absorb new patterns of attention and response. Such reading also develops what we might call literary empathy, the capacity to inhabit perspectives radically different from our own without losing our center. This skill proves essential for navigating our culturally diverse and politically polarized world, allowing us to understand positions we may not agree with while maintaining our own integrity. The contemplative reader ultimately discovers that texts read us as much as we read them, revealing aspects of ourselves that remain hidden until reflected in the mirror of great literature. This reciprocal relationship transforms reading from passive entertainment into active spiritual practice, making every encounter with authentic literature an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. Chapter 6: Creating Sacred Space in Secular Time. The contemporary spiritual challenge involves not withdrawal from secular life but the sanctification of ordinary time through contemplative awareness. In our religiously pluralistic and increasingly secular culture, the contemplative mind must learn to create sacred space within the structures of daily life rather than depending on institutional containers that may no longer be available or relevant. Sacred space emerges not from external conditions but from the quality of attention we bring to any environment. A corner of an urban apartment can become as conducive to contemplation as a monastery cell if approached with proper intention and discipline. The key lies in understanding that sacredness is not inherent in objects or locations but arises through the conscious dedication of awareness to the cultivation of presence. This insight proves particularly relevant in our digital age, where traditional boundaries between sacred and secular, private and public, work and rest have dissolved. The same device that connects us to global commerce also provides access to contemplative texts and meditation apps. The question becomes not whether technology is sacred or profane, but how we use it to support or undermine contemplative awareness. Creating sacred space in secular time requires establishing clear rituals that mark transitions between different qualities of awareness. This might involve beginning each day with contemplative reading, creating regular periods of silence, or establishing evening practices that allow consciousness to settle before sleep. These rituals need not be elaborate or time-consuming, but they must be consistent enough to create containers for contemplative awareness. The practice also involves learning to recognize and honor what I have called moments of being, those spontaneous eruptions of heightened awareness that can occur anywhere, anytime, when conditions align to reveal the sacred dimension of ordinary experience. These moments cannot be manufactured but can be invited through cultivating receptive awareness throughout daily life. Urban environments, often dismissed as spiritually barren, actually provide unique opportunities for contemplative practice. The city's intensity can serve as a kind of laboratory for maintaining contemplative awareness under challenging conditions. Learning to find stillness within movement, silence within noise, and solitude within crowds develops contemplative muscles that prove invaluable for navigating contemporary life. The contemplative mind also learns to work with secular institutions and activities as potential vehicles for spiritual development. Professional work, family responsibilities, and civic engagement become opportunities to practice presence, compassion, and wisdom rather than obstacles to spiritual life. This integration challenges the false dichotomy between worldly and spiritual concerns. Time itself becomes sanctified through contemplative attention. Instead of experiencing time as a resource to be consumed or a burden to be endured, we begin to recognize temporal experience as the medium through which eternity manifests. Each moment contains the possibility of profound encounter with what transcends ordinary awareness. This practice of creating sacred space in secular time ultimately transforms our relationship to material existence. Instead of seeing the physical world as somehow less real or valuable than spiritual dimensions, contemplative awareness reveals matter as the vehicle through which spirit expresses itself. The body becomes temple, ordinary objects become potential occasions for contemplation, and daily activities become opportunities for practicing presence. The result is a kind of practical mysticism that finds transcendence within immanence, eternity within time, the sacred within the secular. This integration proves essential for contemporary spiritual life, which must learn to flourish within conditions of cultural plurality and technological mediation rather than despite them. Chapter 7: The Poetry of Everyday Awakening. Awakening, that gradual recognition of the sacred dimension that permeates ordinary experience, occurs not through dramatic revelations but through the cultivation of poetic attention to daily life. Every moment contains what the mystics call thin places, where the eternal becomes temporarily visible within temporal experience. But these openings require contemplative eyes to perceive them. The poetry of everyday awakening emerges from what Gerard Manley Hopkins called inscape, the particular pattern or design that makes each thing uniquely itself while simultaneously connecting it to the universal patterns that govern all existence. This recognition transforms mundane experiences into occasions for wonder, revealing that what we call ordinary is actually extraordinary when perceived with sufficient depth. Consider the simple act of preparing morning tea. The contemplative mind encounters in this ritual the entire history of agriculture, the movement of seasons, the transformation of leaves through fire and water, the gift of sensory awareness that allows taste and aroma to register in consciousness. What appears to be routine activity becomes, under contemplative attention, a meditation on interconnectedness, impermanence, and the miracle of sentient existence. This poetic attention differs from aesthetic appreciation or romantic sentiment. It involves precise recognition of what is actually present rather than projection of idealized meanings onto experience. The contemplative learns to distinguish between authentic perception and the overlay of concepts, expectations, and interpretations that usually filter our encounter with reality. Digital technology, properly used, can support rather than undermine this poetic attention. Photography, for instance, can train the eye to notice details that might otherwise escape awareness. Writing apps can capture insights that emerge during contemplative observation. The key lies in using technology as a servant to contemplative awareness rather than allowing it to become a substitute for direct experience. The practice of everyday awakening also involves learning to recognize what I have called objective correlatives in daily life, external circumstances that mirror internal states, allowing for the kind of integration between inner and outer experience that poetry achieves through metaphor. A traffic jam becomes an opportunity to practice patience, a difficult conversation becomes a chance to cultivate compassionate listening, a moment of natural beauty becomes an invitation to experience gratitude. This recognition requires developing what we might call emotional precision, the ability to identify exactly what we are experiencing without immediately judging it as positive or negative. The contemplative mind learns to inhabit the full spectrum of human emotion without being overwhelmed by intensity or numbed by avoidance. This emotional literacy proves essential for both personal growth and interpersonal relationship. The poetry of everyday awakening ultimately reveals that enlightenment is not a distant goal to be achieved but a capacity for presence that can be cultivated moment by moment. Each breath, each step, each encounter becomes an opportunity to practice the kind of attention that transforms ordinary consciousness into awakened awareness. This understanding challenges both spiritual materialism, the desire to accumulate enlightened experiences, and spiritual bypassing, the attempt to transcend human conditions rather than fully inhabiting them. Authentic awakening emerges through complete engagement with whatever life presents, finding the sacred within the secular rather than escaping to some other realm. The result is a life lived as a kind of walking meditation, where contemplative awareness infuses ordinary activities with significance and depth. This does not require withdrawal from worldly responsibilities but rather their transformation through the quality of attention we bring to them. Work becomes service, relationship becomes spiritual practice, and daily life becomes the arena for realizing what the mystics call union with the divine. Such awakening proves contagious, creating ripple effects that extend far beyond individual transformation to influence family, community, and culture in subtle but profound ways. Conclusion. The contemplative mind emerges not as escape from our digital age but as its most necessary gift, a quality of awareness that can transform technological tools from masters into servants, fragmentation into integration, distraction into depth. Through patient cultivation of presence, sacred listening, and poetic attention to ordinary experience, we discover that every moment contains doorways to the eternal. This is not a retreat into solipsistic inwardness but an engagement with reality that is both more precise and more compassionate than reactive consciousness allows. When we learn to inhabit our experience fully, we become more available to others, more responsive to genuine need, more capable of contributing to the healing our world desperately requires. The path forward requires neither rejecting modernity nor surrendering to its superficiality, but rather developing the contemplative discernment that can extract wisdom from information, meaning from stimulation, and sacred presence from secular time. In this way, the ancient invitation to be still and know becomes not an anachronism but the most contemporary of responses to our cultural moment. Let us begin where we are, with whatever awareness we possess, trusting that contemplative attention, cultivated with patience and discipline, will gradually reveal the inexhaustible depths that lie hidden within the surface of ordinary life.